Hello everybody. In this video we're going to take a look at these tools here. These tools will allow us to draw very simple shapes in Photoshop. Now one thing to keep in mind is that just like any of these other tools here, whatever tool you currently have selected, you'll see a number of its settings found here. And the setting I would like to first draw your attention to is this one. We have this drop-down box where we can select shape, path, or pixels, and I'm going to currently have it set to shape, which I believe is Photoshop's default setting for this tool. And also, like so many of these other tools, remember that if you hold your mouse down on it, you'll see that this button here actually has a number of different settings or a number of different tools nested underneath it, allowing you to draw additional shapes, not just rectangles, but rounded rectangles, ellipses, polygons, line tool, and a custom shape tool as well. We'll take a look at the rectangle tool first. So I'll select that. And drawing a rectangle is very simple. You can simply click, drag from one corner to another, and you can create a rectangle of any dimensions that you choose. Now, sometimes you might want to draw a square, in which case you can use your rectangle tool while holding down the Shift button, and then simply drag once again from one corner to another, and you'll get a perfect square. And to show you yet another setting, I'm going to drag some guidelines out to make it a little easier to see what I'm going to be doing here. Not that these guidelines are necessary. I still have my rectangle tool selected, and I'm going to draw once again from the corner here, pulling out to draw a rectangle. What I wanted you to notice is if you press down the Alt key on your keyboard instead, you'll notice that instead of drawing from corner to corner, it'll draw your rectangle or your square from the center. It'll draw it from the center rather than from the corner. Now, besides the rectangle tool, as mentioned earlier, we of course have these other options, which I recommend playing around with. We've got the ellipse, works exactly identically to the rectangle tool. Once again, you can draw perfect circles by holding down Shift, or by pressing down the Alt key, it'll draw it from the center rather than from the corner. Very similar to the rectangle tool that we looked at earlier. Other options include the Polygon Tool. Currently it's set to 5-sided, and you can find that setting here. As I said earlier, the settings for all these tools are typically found here, and you'll notice that it is currently set to 5 sides. That's why I've got this 5-sided polygon shape here. We could set that to a different number, such as 8 if we wanted, and then we will get a 8-sided polygon, 8-sided polygon shape. We of course also have our line tool. And we also have this custom shape tool. And by selecting the custom shape tool, we can navigate up to here to the tool settings where we've got these shapes. There's a drop down here where you have some different options to choose from, such as leaf trees, animals, boats, flowers, and we can just drag a shape in there, and in this case we've got a lion. Now, when you're working with these, one thing you'll notice in the layers here is that these layers look a little bit different. For one thing, they all have, with the exception of lion, although it's still also one of these types of layers, you'll notice this says shape on it. And then it also has this little icon here indicating that it is a shape layer. These are different than the standard layers that we've been looking at up to this point. Let's just take a look at that. Take a look at an example of this. So if I were to switch over to my brush tool, because I want to draw on this layer, what you'll notice is that it will not let me. It tells us, if I try to, that the shape layer must be rasterized before proceeding, and then asks if I wish to rasterize this. I'm going to cancel. I'm not going to rasterize it. I just wanted you to be aware of that this is not your normal layer. You can't draw on it, paint on it. A lot of these other tools are not going to work on a shape layer because the power or the benefit of these shapes requires a different workflow. So I've started a new Photoshop file here so that we can start to understand that different workflow that you need to use when working with these shapes. So let's go back to, we'll go back to the rectangle that we looked at first, and I'm simply going to draw a rectangle in here. A couple things I want you to notice. First of all, I'm going to press enter here to complete the action. We've got a black rectangle here. Now, if I were to change my foreground color here, let's say I changed it to this yellow color here, and then I were to draw another rectangle, you'll notice that it actually did not take this foreground color here, and that is because the color for the shape nodes currently is being set here on fill. If I change that fill color to that yellow or to some other color, then we can change the color of the shape. Not only can we fill the shape, we can also add a stroke to it, or an outline. And that is found here, under stroke, and we've got our stroke width. I'm going to increase the stroke width. And as you can see here, we now have a very thick black outline around our shape. Let's go ahead and bring that in a little bit. Maybe something like this. Not only can we add a stroke to it, we can of course change the color of the stroke as well as the way that the stroke is drawn. So let's take a look at that. If I click on the stroke here, you'll see that we've got our recently used colors that we can add, or we can give it a different color if we choose. Let's say I wanted to give it a blue outline. We can do that. Notice that my outline on this rectangle is now blue. But in addition to that, we can also change the style of stroke here with this drop down. So if we wanted, we could do something that is dashed or dotted, for example. I'm going to change it back to black so that you can more easily see it. Perhaps we'll also increase the width of it so that you can see it a little bit better. Another thing to take note of is that these tool settings not only can we adjust them here, but I currently can adjust them here as well because I have this Properties tab visible. So you can see that we've got the color, we've got our stroke, we've got our various drop downs for the type of stroke, and so on. So all these properties for your layer can also be found here if you have your Properties tab visible over here on the right. Let's take a look at a couple more tools that we can use with these shape tools. And the tool that we'll take a look at next is the one right above it. In fact, I'm going to select it. I'm going to hold my mouse over it and select the first option here, which is the Path Selection tool. It's the arrow that is black. And what I want you to notice is that when I use that tool, I can take this shape and move it wherever I want. I'm grabbing more or less the whole object here. Now this is very different actually than using your move tool here. I'm not moving the layer itself, I'm moving the object on the layer. So again, this tool here, the Path Selection tool, will allow you to grab the whole shape and move it. I'm going to hide some of these other layers so that we can really focus on this one layer, and I'm going to take the object and put it more into the center here, and we'll take a look at yet another tool. So it's found in the very same place as this Path Selection tool, but I'm holding my left mouse down and I'm going to select the Direct Selection tool. The Path Selection tool is a solid black arrow. The Direct Selection tool is a white arrow. So we'll select that and see how that differs. So what you'll notice is if I select the object, what I can do is deal with the components of it. So in other words, I can grab a corner here and I can reposition it. Now I'm getting this message here asking me if this operation, saying that this operation will turn the live shape into a regular path. Do I want to continue? Yes, I do. And now I can adjust the shape of this by grabbing these corners and moving them and making it into something other than a rectangle. In addition, I can also grab edges and move them like so. Now, what if I need more than just 4 points? I want to draw a more complicated form than something that is four-sided. How would I do that? Well, we'll take a look at yet another tool. This tool is found right here, just above the text tool. Right now it's actually set to the setting I want. I'm going to hold my mouse down so you can see the different settings. We've got the pen tool, freeform pen tool, curvature, add anchor, and so on and so on. We want to add an anchor point. That's what's going to give us additional corners on this shape. So I'll select that tool and I'll simply draw additional points in here. Actually, I didn't intend on drawing that smooth shape. I wanted to show you that a little bit later, but as you can see, I can add points simply by clicking in there, like that. If we go back to our Direct Selection tool, then we can grab those points and move them wherever we want. In fact, you'll notice that they're all creating these nice smooth curves. We'll take a look at how we can convert those those anchor points to be either smooth curves or angular, more angle type corners in just a moment. So as I was adding those anchor points, perhaps I don't want them to be nice smooth curves like that. What can I do to make them into sharp angles? Well, we'll take a look at another tool found in the same place as the Add Anchor tool that we were looking at earlier. I'll hold my mouse down once again, and I'm going to select this last option down here, the Convert Point tool. I'll select that, and then on any of these smooth curves, if I just click on it, it'll make it into a sharp angle. Like that. In fact, this tool will do more than just make those smooth curves into sharp angles. It'll do the opposite as well. We can take any of these sharp corners here and make them into nice smooth curves. So let's try it on this really pronounced corner here. We'll make it into a smooth curve. I'm simply, with the same tool selected, with my Convert Point tool selected, I'm going to click, drag. You notice I get this handle, and I can in fact make that into a nice smooth curve. Very nice, very easy. Perhaps I'll make this one into a sharp corner once again. Now, rather than adding anchor points, what if I want to get rid of some anchor points? Well, once again, we can return over here to this tool, hold the mouse down, and we've got our Delete Anchor Point tool as well. And we can come in here and we can simply click on an anchor point that we wish to get rid of. See what we get here. Okay. Now remember, a little while ago we looked at this tool over here. I'm going to return it back to the path selection tool. Remember that that's what's going to allow you to move the whole object. Or if you select the direct selection tool, that's what's going to allow you to grab points and move them around, points that already exist in your object. But we can also use this tool to adjust the handles of our curves. And yet another thing I can do with this tool is, if I hold down the Alt key while I grab the handle, I can break that tangent there so then I can work with the two sides of the handles for this. I can work with them independently. In fact, that's probably a perfect opportunity then to take a look at what happened here. I'm going to hold down Alt again. I'm going to grab this handle, and you can see I can pull that back out. These handles were simply on top of one another, which is why we're getting that very sharp point there, which of course is, if it's what you want, then that's perfect. Now remember, if you make a mistake or you don't like the way that an anchor point is behaving, you can always come back over here and use your Convert Point tool, and you can simply drag it back out like that. We'll look at a couple more things with these shapes that we can create. I'm going to once again select my rectangle tool, and I'll draw a rectangle. Currently we have it set to fill with yellow. We can keep it at that. Because what I actually want to show you is if we go ahead and have an outline on it, we can click on Fill and we can tell it to have no fill. or we can fill it again, or we can fill it with a gradient. We've got lots of different options here. Let's make it yellow again. And we'll take a look at some other things that we can do. I'm going to select, I think, my ellipse tool. We'll try that one out. And I'm going to draw an ellipse. We'll have it overlap this rectangular shape, something like that. And what I'd like to show you now is how we can take these two layers that we have here. See, we've got two layers, this one and this one. And I'm going to select them both, right click, and I'm going to say merge shapes. And when I merge shapes, you can see what's happened here. We get this interesting, more complicated shape. In fact, if we were to come over here once again to our path selection tool, you'll see that these still exist as separate shapes, but they're on the same layer now, and we get this nice effect with this interesting form along with our outline. We actually have a couple other options that we can do with this. You can find these other options here with this drop down. You can see we've got new layer, combine shape, subtract front shape, and so on. But we can also do a lot of those same things here in our properties under the path operations. So let's take a look at some of these different path operations here. I'll click on this one, and you can see what that did. This one, where we get more kind of a Boolean type thing, where we get the areas where they're overlapping. Or actually, let's see, yes, where they're overlapping. And then we have this one, which subtracts the area where they overlap. So very much like a Boolean operation that you might do in something like Maya, but instead we're dealing with just shapes. So as we looked at earlier in the video, these shape layers are different than your standard layers. We can make them, though, into a standard layer by rasterizing it. So let's take a look at that. In fact, I'm going to duplicate this layer so that we can look at two different examples of this. And I'm going to move one of them here, and we'll move the other one here. This time I actually did move the layer, not the objects themselves, just so you know. We'll take a look at just this layer first. So I'm going to select my brush tool, and I'll try to paint in here. You can see that I've got this icon indicating that I can't do that. And when I try to do it, I get this pop-up saying the shape layer must be rasterized before proceeding. Rasterize the shape. If I say OK, this is now just a regular layer. It's no different than other layers that we've looked at in the past. So in other words, now all these tools, such as this tool, you'll see it has no effect on it. I cannot come in here to my direct selection tool and adjust it any longer. This is just as if it were drawn with plain old pixels. I'm going to hide that and show you yet another way to do that. So here we've got this other layer. With this one, of course, I still can come in here using these various tools here. Oh, I'm not on the proper layer. That's why it's not working. Let me select the layer here. And as you can see, I can come in here and I can adjust these points now if I want to. And get a different effect, right? But if I want to rasterize this, what I can do is I can right-click on the layer, and I can say rasterize layer. And now this one is also just a regular layer. These are pixels now. And because they are pixels, of course, that means then that we can draw on it. We can erase. We can do anything we want on it as we would with any other layer in Photoshop. So in summary, remember that you can easily draw shapes in your Photoshop scenes using these techniques. You can change the color of those shapes, and you can give them an outline. You can adjust their placement, and you can work with its components or its parts to adjust the individual anchor points on your shape. You can change the type of curves that you have in it. You can convert them. And fine-tune them. And generally create any shape that you want. Now, before concluding this video, we'll take a look at one more thing, and that is these settings that we talked about earlier for this tool here, for these tools, where I indicated earlier in the video that we had changed it to shape. What I'm going to do this time is go to the drop down and change it to 2 pixels, just to demonstrate that you can also draw these shapes as just simple pixel shapes. So we got our rectangle tool here. I'm going to create a new layer for this because now I need to be working on a layer. It's not a shape layer. And I'll just draw these shapes. We can come in here, and this time we are using the colors here as our foreground and background color. Maybe choose another shape to work with, like the Ellipse tool, and so on. So that's another way that you can work with the shape tool here in Photoshop. Anyway, I hope that this has been useful for you, and thank you for watching.